Thank you very much, Mike. That was a really good presentation, and exactly what we want to see is like a partner or end user who take our tool and take it to the next step, right? As a product itself, we cover the database security as best as we can, using STIG, CIS, CVE, like Ian mentioned earlier. And in addition, Guardium itself has a research team with specialty in many different databases. So a lot of tests that you see in our offering, if you don't see a reference for STIG or CIS, these are things that truly comes out from our lab, and a big chunk of them do, especially for like, for those who use IBM database like DB2 or LUW, for ZOS and for iSeries, we have really great solutions for these. These are proprietary. They're very well thought out research, working with not just within the research team, but with the actual database team, the security team within each database division, so that when we make these recommendations, they're as accurate, as valid as it can be, and it's something that is worth, from the end user to look into this and harden it. Okay. So today I'm going to walk you to the query-based builder. It's basically when you purchase Guardium, you have the real product. You have an appliance that, just like you currently do with the DAM solution, is all embedded in one appliance. But in there, there's the vulnerability assessment. You can create as many assessments as you like with thousands of data sources. You can schedule jobs. You can, once you create an assessment, you're sure this works. As Mike mentioned, that you want to make sure that you run this on a regular basis to make sure that nothing bad is changing at the databases. So we do have capability that allows you to run this as often as you like. And I often get questions from folks, how often do we do this? This is not a real-time change, so you don't need to do it like every minute or so. But, at a minimum, think of doing this once a week, and it need to, slowly adjust your interval based on your need. And it doesn't hurt to run this multiple times, because the scan typically takes a couple minutes, or as much as maybe 3 or 4 minutes per DBMS type. So it is very fast. Okay, so I have in the slide that Kathy mentioned, we go into the efforts of rather than a lot of time people see things in demo, and then by the time you get back to your environment, you may not know all the steps. So in the slide that we're providing today, if you follow the slide page by page, it really walks you from when you log in, what do you click to get to where you need to do this, and then it walks you to step by step. What do you do for test name? How do you pick data type, categories, and on. So that when you're done, if you follow the example that is shown in each one of this, you can literally copy and paste these examples, including the query itself, and put that onto your own appliance, and then be able to run it, and you can see it for yourself. So this will be a really good reference for how to do it. And in these slides, we also offer all kinds of tips and gadget things that you will help make your experience a lot easier as you try this out on your own. And I think once you figure out how to use it, for the very first time, I think after that, it's really based on your imagination what you can do to harden your application, and further hardening things that you may want to do very specifically to your databases. So I'm going to walk you through. I'm going to walk you through the the appliance. Okay, so here I'm on a Guardium version 9 appliance, latest release. However, you do not need to be. All you need to be is at least a Guardium version 9 patch 50 or higher, and you have all the capability that I'm talking about today that you can use. So first, let me log out of my appliance. Okay, I'm logging into my appliance as an administrated user. Okay, there are two ways to get to the query-based builder and the vulnerability assessments area of the appliance. What you saw earlier from Michael's slide was he came into the appliance as a normal user. So if you were logged into the appliance as a normal user, you will click on the Assess Harden tab, and you see this icon here, and basically you click on that, and it will get you to the security assessment. Okay, this is what you see on my screen is pretty unique because I want to demonstrate both scenario, an administrator user and then an end user. If you log in as an administrator user, you typically see this area only of the screen, right? And this side is what the end user see. Okay? I have a very unique perspective that combines both of them, so I can show both. Okay, so I'm gonna click on Tool, okay, and Security Assessment. Okay. And this is what the end user, the admin user would see. What you would first do is click on, for those who already have vulnerability assessment, this should be fairly familiar to you. New is to create an assessment. Modify is to modify an existing assessment. Configure is, if you click on this, you configure the assessment, and then you can put comment, or if you put a lot of effort in your assessment and you don't want to recreate it, or you want to recreate it, but we have all the feature that you put into it, you can clone it and you can delete it. And then to execute it, every time, manually, you just click run now, and view result is basically give you a nice PDF output of the assessment that you have executed. Okay, this is the area that we're focusing today, is the query-based builder, which allows you to customize your own test. So I'm going to click on it. As you can see here, I already created one. So rather than going through and cutting pastes, in the interest of time, I'm going to show you one that I created. And basically, everything that is in here is actually what is already given on the slide. So for those of you after the tech talk, you can literally copy those and paste into each and one of these elements here. Okay, so let's first talk about the test name. Okay, the test name is you can call it anything you want, but the idea thing is give it a name that is unique, that is means what the test actually does. Okay, in our development environment, typically we don't prefix tests. We simply name the test exactly what we want to call it. Since you're coming in as a end user or as a partner, it is best that you prefix it with something so that it's easier for you to figure out when you run hundreds of tests or thousands of tests. You have an idea, well, which one was was developed by you, which one came from Guardium. So prefix in this case would help. Okay, the database type, there are 11 database type currently on the Guardium version 9 release. You can see we support all the major relational database. In our next release, there will be another 4 or 5 more database type that we will be add to this feature. Okay, so in this case, we're picking SQL Server since this is what we want to do. And the severity, actually the category. Okay, so like Michael mentioned earlier in one of the slides, there's privilege, there's authentication. So privilege is typically has to do with things like system privilege, object privilege, anything that's permission related. Authentication usually has to do with like checking for default password, anything that is relating to password policy. Okay, configuration, typically you will use this when you're checking for very specific parameter that is set in the databases. For example, in SQL Server, we must have at least 15 probably tests that check for various configuration within the databases. So you would use something like that. And version, checking for version and batches. Okay. Other is whatever you cannot fit into what we define as in our template. Okay. Severity is obviously you only use critical when you think this is something that you must fix, as soon as possible, right? And typically we would use critical severity in things like security policy, right? I think these are things that you can fix fairly quick and would harden your database fairly quick as well. I mean, the biggest vulnerability, I mean, there's a lot of vulnerability, but the easiest entry into your databases is finding an account that has a insecure password, right? So anything that, as far as I'm concerned, anything that's relating to password should be a critical. Okay, and then we have major, minor, cautionary, informational. Okay. This is the test description. So you can be as specific as you like, or you can see in some of Mike's slides. It may be as little as a couple sentences. Okay. Since you're developing this test, you really want your end user to know as much as you're going to do on this test. Why am I doing this? What am I checking for? Why is it important? What criteria am I looking at? What will make this test pass or fail? So that when the end user read this, they have an idea, whether they pass this test or fail this test. They know what is happening to them, and they have an idea rather than referencing some online documentation somewhere. If you do this right, your test should be self-documented. External references, if any external reference you have, perhaps in your organization, you may have a baseline or some kind of security guideline that that you must conform to, so you can for sure reference those baseline and what item number or section it is. Okay. You will see that in a lot of our tests, there will be either a Guardium test specific, meaning that this is something that is internally proprietary, or if we reference STIG or CIS or CVE, you will actually see the name of that publication or a very specific ID or item number, so that when you search for this, it point you right to exactly a benchmark that talks about this and get more information about it. Okay, so it is useful. If you put enough information into it, it will help your user figure it out much quicker. Result text for pass. This is basically when you pass a test, you just sort of have to say, why did you pass the test? And so in our cases, it just says the DB owner database level role has not been granted to an unauthorized grantee. Okay, so it can be very simple or it can be very complex depending on what you want to put in. Okay, and the same thing for result text for fail, right? Since my test here is I'm checking for DB owner granted to user and role, right? So DB owner is in SQL Server. Every database has a database owner. Well, we're saying that, granting such privilege in a production database should be very limited. We're not saying it's bad. It is good if the right person has it, but you really want to know who has this privileges so you can check to see whether this user really needs this privileges. Okay, so the result text or fail is basically saying, well, we found some DB owner that has been granted to some unauthorized grantee. And you may ask yourself, what does it mean? How do you know whether a grantee is authorized or is not authorized, right? In the Guardium product, test is that once you execute a test for the very first time once you execute the test for the very first time, it might find you all the grantee, and you may say that, there's 10 grantee in here, but you cannot fail me this test because all these 10 grantees are legitimate DBA in this production databases. So we do have a way that you can filter those 10 users out after you've developed this. But that's something that you don't have to worry at the coding level. The mechanism itself, as you execute it, will handle it. And I will show you this test once it's executed, how you work that. Okay. The recommendation text, typically when you see all our assessment tests, when someone passes a test, that's it. No action required. You've done a great job. You don't have this vulnerability, so go on to the next one. Okay, the fail recommendation is very important, and what happens is when a user fails a test, you have to ask that user, especially someone who has a deadline, trying to meet an audit report and want to get good score and want to harden their security, but if you don't provide enough detail in there, your end user may not know what to do and will end up calling you for help. So it's important in the recommendation text to clearly state why the user failed. Let me bring my screen up a little bit bigger, so in case anyone had problems seeing this. Okay, so I'm going to actually show this recommendation text in my slide. So okay. So you can see in my recommendation for fail, right? We're saying that we recommend that you revoke DB owner role from unauthorized grantee. You can use the SQL Server example command. So we actually giving out the syntax of how you actually would remediate this. Okay, the thing that you don't want to do is make it this automatic and tell the user just go and do this, right? I mean after all, we're telling someone to change the databases, so every change should be reviewed and agreed upon and tested before you roll out in production. So here we actually telling them how to do this, right? The syntax. So because what happened is that the person who actually look at this report may not be the DBA, may not understand what needs to be done, right? Other than, I have a problem, I need to fix it, right? So he or she can actually, if you give them a good recommendation, can actually forward this recommendation to the DBA and say, by the way, this is the problem, this is how you fix it, and, and then in the next part of the test, I'll show you how to find, who are the grantee so that you can tell them, what user you need to revoke this DB owner privilege off, okay? And then, of course, in privilege tests, what you want to do is that there can be user that is legitimate that needs the DB owner, so you have to somehow have a way to authorize these users, so the test the very next time will ignore, checking for these users. So in our case, it's what we call an exception group. You can create an exception group. You can put in all your DBA user in there so that when the test runs the next time, right, it will not, after it finds all the results, right, then you look at your exception group. You go, you know what? I have 10% here that I'm failing. There's 5 in this exception group, so I'm not going to flag these 5. I'm going to flag the other 5 that is not a DBA, and so somebody can do something about it. Okay, so the SQL statement, this is the most important thing in the test is what you are executing against the databases that a user connects to a given data source, okay? It is flexible here. You are only allowed one SQL, so however, the SQL can be as complex as you want to make it. You can have union, you can do all sorts of stuff. You could, in Oracle, you can write PLSQL. In SQL Server, in Sybase, you can write TSQL even. So once you have that ability, you can do all kinds of logic inside your code to present the finding, okay? But ultimately, what we do is that we took your SQL and execute that and get the result, and then compare the result of your SQL statement against the operator and the compare to value of the test. That's when we determine whether we want to the test should pass or this test should fail, right? So in our cases, this query is fairly simple. It is basically a join between three catalog object in SQL Server and finding out, a row name, and we're saying that, well, is DBO ignored since this is sort of like a default in SQL Server behavior. You do not want to talk about it. And then we put a little comment here. Okay, and you can see I have a select count. So that means what I'm looking to do is that if my count come back with a 0, that would mean that I find that there are no grantee with DB owner, then I should pass those tests, right? And if my count come with at least 1 or more, then I know that I have someone that is granted with this DB owner, so the test will fail. Okay, so I'm going to skip to the next 2-3 elements of that. So this is where let me do highlight. So we are at this here. So this SQL statement works actually with the return type, the operator, and compared to a value. So what I'm saying here is this count should be an integer, and the operator I'm comparing to should be an equal, right? And 0 meaning if it's 0, I'm passing the test. If it's anything other than 0, that means there's someone that has this privilege, then I will fail the test and look at it. Okay. Let me talk a little bit more about the SQL statement, and I have this in the slide. So let me go back to the slide. Okay. Okay. So when using comment in a query, which you see in the example query, right? The comment should be like this. Right? Instead of using -- my comment, we pass this ourselves, so therefore it is important that you use this. If you use this comment, the query will not work. Okay. Before you put any query into our query-based builder, it is best that you test this out on a tool, ideally using a native tool for that database type, or even better, a JDBC tool, since our connection is a JDBC, a generic JDBC connection. Okay, and it said here that when you write this SQL, the best way to do it is write it in a way that your SQL returns some number that you can compare, 1, 0, 2, 4, or some number. It's much easier for comparison, and for the most part, I believe every one of your tests can be structured in that way. Okay. In Oracle, we do accept PLSQL, but one of the problems with PLSQL in Oracle is that it does not return any value. When you, for those who understand Oracle, when you execute a block of Oracle code, it will just say PL/SQL block has been successfully executed. So therefore, we cannot compare such a value. However, you can structure your PL/SQL block in a way that it will return a value of that you define in your block. And from there, we can take that value and make that comparison. And I do have a slide that I can show you that as well. And also, in our query-based builder, we come up with a very specific syntax that is only known within the Guardium appliance is threshold. There may be scenario, for example, in if you see in Michael's slide or some of his demo earlier, where he actually checked for, let's say, a number of failed login attempt, or maybe a number of days that the password should be changed. Anything that check for a number, right? You can use a threshold, because who is to say that everyone should have their account logged after 3 login attempts. Perhaps in your organization, or perhaps in that database, it's not as important as a more critical production database. So therefore, you really do want to say, you know what, this database is not that important. So I'm going to, okay, if 5 failed login attempts, I'm going to give the user to have the ability to, make 5 or even more failed login attempt, right? So that I don't lock up the account, because I do not want people calling up the DBA all the time, and maybe this is not as important. I don't want a DBA to be bothered by on this database. So you can customize your test. You can create a threshold, in your SQL. Okay, and there will be a slide that actually show you how to do this. Okay. So in the Oracle cases, this is what you would actually do. This is actually a sample code. Even though we're doing a SQL Server test, you would actually, if you take this piece of code here and put in your query-based builder for an Oracle database, you will be able to follow the slide by using this red value that we define and this question mark. And so whatever that is returned here, we will be able to understand that value and do the comparison. Okay. So let me walk you to the next one, which is the detail. Okay, the detail of the SQL is something that the test only execute if it finds a condition where it will cause the test to fail. So in our cases, in this SQL, if we find that there is at least one database owner in this database, then that means this test will fail. When the test fails, we want to tell the user who is failing this test. So in our cases, we will execute this specific SQL, and when the test fails, it will, whatever that is returned in this SQL statement for detail will show up in your list, so you can hand it to the DBA on remediation. Okay, this query typically can be exactly the same. You can see here I have account, whereas in this places I actually show you the grantee and the grantee type. Okay, if you notice that I do not do this with a comma, because the result that we're going to be displaying in the test result is only one field that can come out of this. Okay, this field can be huge, but it's only one. So therefore, you have to concatenate the result. So I'm going to show you the query when we execute this. So here I have a SQL Server 2005, 2012 server. So this will be my my query. I executed. It showed me that there is 2 users. So what we want to show is that when we execute the detail, who these users are. So it said the grantee equal Lewis, grantee type equals SQL Server, grantee equal guard test, and grantee type equals SQL Server user. Okay, so you do have to concatenate this. Okay, and this part is optional. However, we recommend that you do this every time you write a privilege test. It is very useful. And if you have this, you have the exceptions, so you can exclude which user and whatnot within the Guardium infrastructure. This part here, we don't use it that often in-house, but I think for the end user, this will be very useful. It's a pretext check. It checks to see whether this test should really execute or not. Okay, and so in here you can see that I'm basically checking to see if looking at the all object in the database count to see if there's database principal view exists. Okay. Well, if this does not exist, we have a lot of problems because the database is missing system catalog that no one can reference. Right. But in your cases, and take for example in what Michael showed, right, is a PeopleSoft application, right? Well, you may not want to execute this test if you happen to connect to an Oracle or SQL Server database that hosts that does not have a PeopleSoft table, right? So you can check to see if this table exists in your database or not. If it does not, then there's no reason for you to execute this test because your query will fail because you're going to query some table that does not exist in your database. So you can test for such condition. A count of 1 would mean that, yes, your pretest check actually passed, and you will continue to execute this test. A pretest check SQL 0, meaning that, well, the condition does not exist, so then therefore I'm going to display this. The object does not exist, so research why this is missing, and this test will not execute, and you won't get a pass, you won't get a fail grade, you'll get like something like not applicable to this database. Okay. Now, this is a feature that we added in our version 9 appliance. It's allow you to loop two databases. Okay, for those who know SQL Server, right? When you first create an instance, plain instance, you have like 4 or 5 system databases. You can technically have hundreds of databases, and so since we're checking for a vulnerability, we want this in your instance, right? So if I don't, this will probably going to get executed against whichever database that you specify in your data source, and typically for the most user, it will be a master databases. Okay, so for looping here, I want to check this flag, say that yes, I want to loop to all the databases, and I want to run my query against each and every one of these databases, and behind the scene, we will concatenate all your results and determine your condition for you. Right, and you can put in the database that you want to loop. So in here, I'm saying select name from sys database. That means I'm going to loop to every database that I find in my system. Okay, and you may not want to do that. You may want to say, where name like or name maybe in DB1, DB2, something like that. Okay, it's up to you what you want to do, but the flexibility is there. The looping feature is for any database that require looping. Okay, so that's the easiest way to remember is if this database type has that multiple database type, this feature is support. So that would be like Informix, SQL Server, Sybase, I believe MySQL. It is in our slide. Yep. So yep, and Postgres. Okay. And in addition to writing query, you can do this. Right? You can say, I want to loop to these database. I want you to run against these database only. So you would just put in each database name that exists, followed by a comma. Okay. Oops. Let me go back to here. Okay. The prefix. Basically, what happened when a test fails, you put in a prefix before your details. Okay. This is probably easier if I just show you. This will be what the prefix look like before the details show. Okay, so we have only 15 minutes left, so I want to make sure I cover everything. The byte output variable is something that you do with the only for Oracle, so it's explained on the documentation. I mean on the slide. The threshold, this is a good one. Is just what I mentioned earlier for passive policy. If you want to check this again, a threshold, so you will check this, and you put in your prompt for the threshold, and then what the default value is. Okay. In our tests, we don't have the need for this. However, in the slide here, I actually gave you a very good example of what a test look like here. We're checking for a scenario where you're looking to check for backup, the number of backup on the system that is 12 or less, right? So rather than hard coding a value, you can do something like that. Putting a % sign and the actual word threshold in uppercase, and then you will check this box, and then you put in a prompt, and then you put in a default value. So when the test gets executed, it always checks against, something that, a threshold value of 12, but the end user can then override the threshold to something else by going to the assessment tuning, changing the actual threshold to whatever number that they think is appropriate for their database. Okay, so the return type can be string, integer, date. To be honest with you, I never find a real use case for date. So the majority of the time is usually an integer, or maybe 20% of the time maybe a string. Okay, and then the compare value to whatever you want to compare to make your test pass and fail. Okay, and applicable version is the version of the not the Guardium applying, but the version of the databases. Okay, so it's usually is a major release dot some minor release. The only exception out of that is SQL Server, because, for example, you can see here I have a 9.0 here. 9.0 in SQL Server world, meaning is SQL Server 2005. So for those who know SQL Server, this is very obvious for you. For those who don't, I guess you wouldn't be writing a test for SQL Server to begin with. Other than that, for all other database type, let's say Oracle, it'll be like 11.1, 11.2, or 10.1, 10.2, or like, DB2, it's 8.1, 9.1, 10.1, 10.5, etc. Right? So in our cases, we are saying that execute this test if you find a SQL Server 2005 and higher, right? And we do not have a ceiling for this. Basically, this will work for 2005, 2008, 2012, and 2014, and whatever new release that is introduced by SQL Server. And that's basically what you want to do, okay? So I'm going to back out of this, and I have already executed this, so rather than go into execution, I'm going to show you a couple areas that may be useful. Okay, so, oops, let me get out of this again. Get out of this. Okay, so I'm back to the main security assessment screen. So, I will click, click configure test. So you can see here I actually have two tests that I picked. All right, this is one test that we created, and if I click on the tuning here, I can change all kinds of things. I can override the external reference. Perhaps I do not like that reference. I can change something out. I can override the severity, and I can save this as my default behavior. And since this test is a test that since this test is a test that does privilege, I can actually assign it to an exception group. Okay, I'm not going to assign it to a group right now because I want to show you the behavior. And the skip on error, right? Because we loop through many databases, in a production environment, we hope that this does not happen, but it is possible that you may have database that you're looping through that is offline, that is maybe in a read-only mode, that is maybe some recovery mode. You see the database there, but you just cannot get to it. And so in our cases, by default, we're gonna help you. We're gonna return an error for your test because there is a database that you cannot loop through. So we don't want to just skip it, because by skipping it by default, what happens if that is the most critical database in your infrastructure and you really want to test that, right? So skipping that in that case would be an injustice. So we will force the error so you can actually investigate why this happened. And then once you do, and you think that this may be okay, you can come back to the screen and check this. So the next time it runs into an error, right, it will skip it and will continue to loop to a database that it can connect and does its analysis. Okay, so in SQL Server, you can see that I have one of my server here, a database that's offline, so you cannot connect to it, or you have a database that is read-only. Well, read-only we still can do stuff, and you can have a single user where, well, if someone got to that database before you did, you're just not going to be able to make it. Okay, so let me get out of this. Go back here. Okay, so I will click once now, but this has already run a couple of times already, so I'm just going to show you the result. So let's look at a couple examples if we only have 5 minutes left. So this is the test we created. And again, you can, if you have a SQL Server, you can do the same exact test that I show you here. And so it will help you with the experience of playing around with the tool. Okay, so I click on it. So you can see everything that we did is here. This is our result text fail. And it said here that we looped you all this since we've gone to looping. The mechanism actually show you the database that is evaluated. So you can see we connect you all these databases, right? And we didn't skip any because, well, it's connecting to one of the server that is actually doesn't have any issue with skip. This would be our test description, our external reference, our fail recommendation, and then this is the detail. It said that we connected to, we find that in the test databases, there's these two grantee, and in the Northwind databases, there's this grantee. So in this case, maybe I don't want to talk about, maybe I don't want to flag Lewis. Maybe Lewis is really a DBA, and I really just want to flag this GAR test, right? So what you can do is click on this, right, and drill down to a list of exceptions, right? And if you don't see an exception group here, you can create one easily on your own. Okay, so I have one that's called VA demo. So I'm gonna say that Lewis is good. This guy is not. So I'm just gonna apply. So that means, what that means is that the next time I execute this test, it will not complain about Lewis. It will just complain about this guy, right? And then you will give your DBA this query, and hopefully they will remediate and take care of the issue, and you get a test with passing grade. Okay. I happen to have a test here that show threshold, so I want to cover the threshold in the last few minutes. So when a test has threshold, this is a Guardium feature that it will say that threshold has been used, what the threshold is being applied, right? And this is a prompt that you put in when you put in a threshold, right? And everything else here is the same. So if I go back to the configuration of the test and clicking on the test tuning, So this is where I would be able to change the threshold. So if 3 is no good, I can change 5, and then click on Save. Okay, so with that, I apologize for taking a long time, but we do have 5 more minutes. So I will open up to any question if anyone have questions.